Welcome back to Crimes Unearthed 911. In this second part, we will continue to explore the stories of women ruthless murderers, from mothers killing their children, wives murdering their husbands for money, to terrifying conspiracies that led them to face the death penalty. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next chilling stories. 11. Catherine Thompson, California. In 1990, Catherine Thompson, a wife and mother of two, carefully plotted the murder of her husband, Melvin Thompson, in order to collect a $400,000 life insurance payout. Driven by greed and a desire to change her life, Catherine hired a hitman to carry out the crime. Plan was executed with cold precision, and Melvin was shot and killed at his auto repair shop. He died from a single bullet, unaware that his death was part of a ruthless conspiracy orchestrated by his own wife. The brutality of her crime was revealed in the 1993 trial, where the jury determined that Catherine had plotted the murder for financial gain. She was sentenced to death, becoming one of California's most notorious cases of greed-fueled betrayal. 31 years later, Catherine Thompson still remains on death row, facing the consequences of an irreversible action. Each day on death row, she lives with the regret of a decision that cost her husband his life and tore her family apart. 12. Manling, Tsang, Williams, California. In 2007, Manling Tang Williams committed an act of unimaginable violence, overwhelmed by uncontrollable negative emotions. In a fit of rage, she murdered her husband with a samurai sword and then proceeded to suffocate her two young sons, showing no mercy, no remorse. Her actions shocked the community. This was a mother and a wife, yet she had brutally ended the lives of those closest to her. During her trial in 2010, Manling was sentenced to death. 14 years later, she still awaits the inevitable consequence of her violent outburst. Her crime forces society to confront the extreme consequences of losing control and the darkness within. The loss of her family is something she must live with, as the lives she destroyed can never be replaced. 13. Maria del Rosio, California. In 1990, Maria del Rosio Alfaro committed a brutal crime when she broke into a friend's home with the intent to steal. But in an unforgivable act, Maria murdered 9-year-old Autumn Wallace by stabbing her 50 times. After killing the innocent child, Maria continued her crime spree by stealing belongings and selling them for drug money. Maria Alfaro became the first woman in Orange County's history to be sentenced to death for such a horrific crime. In 1992, she was convicted and sentenced to death. And 32 years later, she continues to face the consequences of her senseless and cruel act. Every day, she must live with the realization that she took the life of an innocent child driven by her greed and selfishness. 14. Cherie Lash, Rhoades, California. In 2014, Cherie Lash Rhoades carried out a brutal attack, killing 4 people at the office of the Cedarville Rancheria tribe. Her motive stemmed from accusations of embezzling tribe funds and a conflict over being expelled from the tribe. In a fit of rage and feeling betrayed, Cherie meticulously planned and executed a cold-blooded act of murder, showing no mercy for those she deemed responsible for her downfall. She shot and killed those she believed were involved in her expulsion, taking their lives in a ruthless attack. After the crime, Cherie was swiftly apprehended and brought to trial. In 2017, she was sentenced to death. Now, 7 years have passed since Cherie was sentenced, and she continues to face the consequences of her unforgivable actions, waiting on death row. She must live with the reality of the lives she took and the irreversible toll of her violent decisions. 15. Skylar Preciosa, Deleon, California. In 2004, Skylar Preciosa Deleon a former child actor, lured the Hawks couple aboard a yacht with the intent to steal it. She forced the couple to sign a title transfer for the yacht, then callously threw them overboard, causing them to drown in the dark of night. Skylar's actions were motivated by greed, and her crime would cost her more than she ever anticipated. Sentenced to death in 2008, Skylar has spent 15 years on death row at San Quentin, where she awaits her final fate. This chilling crime serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and the lengths to which some will go for financial gain, even at the expense of innocent lives. 16. Tanya J. Nelson, California. In 2005, Tanya J. Nelson and her accomplice brutally murdered a fortune teller and his daughter in Westminster, California, after becoming enraged by the fortune teller's predictions. In an act of chilling coldness, the pair stabbed the victims to death and then painted their faces in an attempt to conceal their identities. Tanya was convicted of these murders and sentenced to death in 2010. 15 years later, she remains on death row, still facing the consequences of her ruthless act. This crime, born from a bruised ego and a moment of uncontrollable rage, left the victims dead and the community stunned, forcing everyone to reckon with the dangers of unaddressed anger. 17. Jason Michael Hann, California. Jason Michael Hann committed one of the most horrifying acts of domestic violence when he murdered his 2 young children within just 2 years. In a calculated and chilling move, he hid their bodies in storage units, trying to cover up the murders. The brutality of his actions left a lasting impact, as these innocent children were murdered by the one person who should have protected them. Jason was sentenced to death in 2013 and has spent 11 years on death row. His case serves as a horrific reminder of how extreme neglect and violence can emerge from within families, replacing love and protection with cruelty and death. The lives of these children, once full of promise, were stolen, and Jason must now live with the consequences of his unimaginable crime. 18. Heather Leavell Keaton, Alabama. In 2010, Heather Leavell Keaton, in an unforgivable act of cruelty, poisoned and strangled her husband's 2 children. These innocent children had to endure the brutality of their own stepmother. Heather's actions not only took the lives of these children, but also shattered the family and the community, leaving lasting pain for the surviving family members. In 2015, Heather became the first woman to be sentenced to death in Mobile County. 10 years later, she still sits on death row. Her crime is a painful lesson in cruelty and a grim reminder of the responsibility lost in the role of a stepmother. Not only did she lose the ability to love, but she also destroyed the lives of innocent children. 19. Lorraine Alison Hunter, California. In 2009, Lorraine Alison Hunter, along with her 16-year-old daughter, devised a plan to murder her husband in order to collect a $1 million life insurance payout. She meticulously planned the murder, making the crime even more complex and cruel. This is a prime example of how greed and selfish scheming can push someone to unimaginable acts of violence. In 2018, Lorraine Alison Hunter was sentenced to death. 6 years later, she still waits on death row, facing an unchangeable sentence. Her crime serves as a warning about the dangers of unchecked greed, as a woman was willing to kill her own spouse for money. 20. Belinda Magaña, California. In 2009, Belinda Magaña and her boyfriend committed an unbelievably cruel and terrifying act when they tortured and murdered her 2-year-old son. The marks on the child's body showed that not only was he beaten, but he also endured prolonged suffering before being killed in a brutal manner. This crime not only took a life, but also represented a horrific violation of a helpless child's right to live. Belinda Magaña was sentenced to death in 2015 for the tortious act before murdering her son. 10 years later, she still faces the punishment for the brutal actions she carried out. This serves as a horrifying lesson on the cruelty that can come from those who are supposed to love and care for a child, turning into the very ones who destroy their innocent lives. The price of crime, a high price to pay. The stories you've just heard are not only shocking crimes, but also stark reminders of the cruelty that can lie hidden behind those who are supposed to be the closest to us. These women were once mothers, wives, and lovers, but their wrong decisions led them to pay the ultimate price with the lives of their loved ones, and ultimately, a death sentence. Part 2 may have come to an end, but the journey is far from over. Don't miss the next part of Crimes Unearthed 911. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Crimes Unearthed 911. The journey to uncover the truth is not over yet.